Greetings, everyone. My name is John Farner with the Irrigation Association. Hope you are doing well. Welcome to our sixth and final Bringing Water to Life webinar for this season. This one is on the Texas WaterSmart initiative, how Texas saved their landscapes. Really cool webinar we have going on today, and I appreciate all of you attending. I know there was a little bit of a scheduling change with this webinar. I will take full blame for that. It had nothing to do with our presenter, Amy Graham. It had nothing to do with everyone else. I am actually on a federal grand jury, and they meet on Thursdays, so I could not attend that webinar, and everyone else who was able to run it was not available, so we had to change the date for that. So I appreciate Amy's flexibility in rescheduling for today on this glorious Tuesday, and everyone else who has joined us for this live webinar. Really do appreciate it. And rest assured, we're going to have a second season for 2018 coming up here after the summer months as we enter into late summer and fall, and be on the lookout for our announcements for later on that. For those of you who have attended our webinars in the past, this slide is very familiar to all of you. We are recording this webinar. We're going to put it up on our website. You can view it at irrigation.org. /webinar_series. If you have any questions during the webinar, please put them into the toolbox, the GoToWebinar toolbox there, and I will moderate a Q&A session. Type in as they pop up, because maybe an instance where I can chime in with Amy and say, hey, about this slide real quick. Or we can do them all at the end, but chime in right away, and we'll see how it goes there. We are offering CEUs for this webinar. For those of you, those 70 of you who are on live right now, we are keeping track of your attendance that is being uploaded automatically into our database. So no needs to worry there if you get that awesome audit letter in the mail for your CEUs. If you are viewing this recorded, just take some screenshots, that alt print screen, and save it onto a file, somewhere at the beginning, middle, and end of the webinar. Just note the date and time you watched it, and that will suffice for your audit with keeping records for your CEUs. I've confirmed that with our staff here in our Fairfax office. Moving on, so this webinar is about the great state of Texas and how they coped with a significant drought a few years ago. And I'll just run through. Amy may have some of these slides in her presentation there as well, but I just want to give you a synopsis of exactly what they faced a few years ago. It seems like yesterday, but it was a few years ago. So this is our drought webinar. Our drought monitor of what Texas looks like today. So Amy, you are going through a little bit of drought right now up north, it looks like. So I'm sure you are heavily involved with monitoring what's going on up there and any kind of measures that may be dealt with. So this is the latest drought monitor for today. The new one is going to be released in 2 days on Thursday, but that's what Texas faces right now. Moving on, last year, looking pretty good. 2016, same thing. Okay, not much. Let's go 5 years before that and what 2011 looked like. Okay. As you can see, we're looking at significant, long, sustained drought in the state of Texas, which was not welcomed by any stretch of imagination, and drastic measures needed to be taken to cope with this drought on several levels. So that's all I'm going to really outline here, because Amy Graham, who is our speaker, one of my favorite people in the industry who I work with, she's the president, CEO, and everything else in between for the Texas Nursery and Landscape Association. Close friend of the Irrigation Association, do a lot of joint initiatives and work together. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce her now. And Amy, I'm going to go ahead and just give the controls over to you. So take it away.
Awesome. Let's see if we can make technology work. Good deal. Is my screen working?
It looks like it is.
Good deal. Well, thanks, John, for having me. I'm excited about sharing this. I was able to share a little bit about this. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on. Sorry about that, Amy. You're on. You're on.
Okay, I just started and you muted me. Anyway, I was able to share a little bit about this at the IA show this summer, and hopefully if you were able to hear me this summer, I'm going to share a little bit more. And for those of you who weren't able to attend, hopefully we can share some insights about what we did. This is as much about crisis management and how to not only manage a crisis, but also work through a crisis and be prepared for the next one as anything else. I will also tell you that because this started in 2011 and continued on for several months, that and it has been a process and project that continues on today, that the information that I'm sharing with you doesn't quite have a really good timeline to it. And so if you'll bear with the information, I think we'll get there. And if you need additional information, or if it seems a little scattered, I apologize, but I think we'll get there together, and any questions you have, I can answer. I'm going to try to show a video, and I'm hoping you can hear the video or the sound, and if you can't, we'll stop it and I'll have it online, but I think we'll be okay. So let's see where we go with this. Ooh, everything's slower. It's not even the right one.
Water supply for their water serves about 1.6 million residents in the North Texas area. Businesses came forward, Scotts Miracle-Gro, Home Depots, Kroger, and others, and said, we want to help solve the problem, do it in a way that's not a mandate, but do it with consumer education.
And for the first time, state and city officials have joined with private businesses to encourage Texans to stop wasting water. It's called Texas WaterSmart.
For Agriculture Commissioner Todd Staples,
this last drought reminded us of the severe economic consequences of not having an available water supply. In short, it costs Texans jobs.
the Texas WaterSmart program suggests some common sense methods: watering when it's dark, checking for leaks, and adjusting sprinklers so water's not wasted on sidewalks and streets.
is honored to be a part of Texas WaterSmart. This public awareness effort is a great fit for us, as we have stepped up our efforts to educate our customers on water conservation during the drought.
We need a more immediate solution to our water shortage. Texas WaterSmart is leading the way in educating homeowners and businesses on the best ways to reduce the amount of water they use in our district.
Thanks to the simple and easy-to-use water-saving techniques touted by Texas WaterSmart and Water IQ, families and businesses are making efforts to reduce their water use. This is extremely important during these drought conditions.
I'm Agriculture Commissioner Todd Staples with a simple WaterSmart tip. Adjust your sprinklers so only your lawn is watered, not the house, sidewalk, or street. Be water smart and save. For more information, visit TexasWaterSmart.com.
Okay. Well, what we have here is that was kind of the beginning of where we started, and it really told pretty much the story of a lot of the beginnings of the whole project. Well, the mission of Texas WaterSmart is to promote water conservation, improve Texas environment, you know, to improve and the lawns and gardens. But the last sentence here, or the last part of this, is to protect the freedom of businesses to operate responsibly. What Texas WaterSmart wanted to do, and it was really important for us, is that we wanted to merge water conservation and businesses operating responsibly together. And we knew we could do it if we all sat at the table and worked together. And we needed to make sure that the right people were there and working and talking the same story. And that was huge. So who was it that were at the table? Who funded the projects? Who made up the partnerships, as was related in the video? We did have government officials at the state, local level. We had agencies, regulatory agencies, as well as state elected officials. We had industries, we had large corporations, we had small businesses, we had trade associations, we had water purveyors, municipalities, water districts. That they were all there at the table talking and listening to each other. It was an absolutely beautiful thing. And we didn't always agree, but we certainly knew that we were in crisis and we needed to work together. So what are some of the things that we did? All right, so some of the things that did happen is that we knew that there was influence that as a group that we did have, and that with the group of people that we had, we needed to make sure that we knew how to use this influence. And so we conducted benchmark surveys to determine the attitudes of the consumer on water conservation, because we really did not know exactly where to start and what was going on out there as far as attitudes of the consumer and who they would listen to and what they knew about water conservation as a whole. And again, this was way, way, way back then. And then based on the survey feedback, we came up with the messaging. And as a result of that is when we came, or we did develop the large radio and TV ad buys. We did hold news conferences throughout the state. We had announcements in grocery stores. SeaWorld was a major partner. The zoos in the states where we had billboards. Any place that we could put a message, we had approached, and this was a full-on. I will also tell you that many of the municipalities, and we're going to continue to talk about this throughout, is many of the, especially in the major metro areas and a lot of the large water purveyors, they had their own programs. And that was okay. That was great. And they continued on with those programs. What we knew and what we learned was that when in fact they worked with us and we coordinated our messages with them, and we worked under a large umbrella, that we were only stronger together. And so what if it was Texas WaterSmart and Water IQ, or Texas WaterSmart and Water Whisperer program? Yay, that's great. Because we didn't care which program the consumer recognized. It was more important for us to get these messages out than to be identified really as Texas WaterSmart or whatever. It was the message that we were getting out that was the key. It was necessarily Texas WaterSmart that was the brand that we were trying to get out. It was truly the message that was the most important. Okay, so some of the messaging and some of the things that came out of our surveys, I did want to touch base on. But some of the pre-survey things that I thought was very interesting and that is really important to the people on this call, and we were pretty proud of this, is it came out very, very clear in the survey, is that the consumer, the number one person that the consumer listened to and believed the most was the message that was delivered by a professional. That they believed that a consumer, or that a message that was delivered by their landscape professional or an irrigation professional was the most believable message that they could hear. The number two place that they believed the most was the message that was delivered by an extension professional. So those things, yay, were very important to us. And we knew that the Texas Nursery and Landscape Association, the Texas Irrigation Association, we needed to take our role and responsibility very seriously. I mean, because what we said and what we did within the program was going to be very important. And those were things that came out of the pre-survey, the first pre-survey that we did. We have done over the years, because of the, again, as I said, there was, we've been doing this for a few years. This was the highlights of some of the first pre-surveys. I think there were some things that came out in the the video that you saw, as far as some of the things, what were some of the driving importance of water conservation that folks wanted, and what was the motivator of consumers. And you saw some of that in the video. The second survey, the second pre-survey, market survey, it was very, very, we dug in a lot deeper on messaging and Conservation is important to ensure a safe, reliable water source, or for safe, reliable water now and for future generations. That was huge, and that came out as the #1 reason throughout the state that people want a safe, reliable water source. And that was big. And then water conservation is important, interesting, and they're interested in conserving water for environmental benefit. That was important as well. It wasn't as important as the first one. But the future generation one was huge. I will also tell you that we also learned that depending on where you were in the state depended on what message was the most important. For instance, and this was kind of interesting, in the Valley area, they were more, the message that was of most concern to them is they were most concerned about higher taxes, that they were, that anything that messaging as it related to if you don't conserve, you're going to have, there's a possibility that it's going to hit your pocketbook with higher taxes of some kind. The West Texas, there were some huge concerns about businesses wouldn't have enough water to produce food and medicine if we didn't conserve water. Theirs was more basic, you know, the basic needs. The DFW area, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, those folks were more concerned. Theirs was, the #1 concern was protecting the environment. So there was a slight variation, not a lot, but there were slight variations in where you were in the state. We really understood that depending on where you were, we really needed to be very, very careful as far as you know, what our messages were. But throughout, the #1, absolute, the #1 across the at least average was, I want to conserve water for future generations. The other thing that was very interesting to us was, aside from the messaging, as far as why they should conserve, it was also different throughout the state. And just, again, different from the messaging that we should use, but the reasons why they should conserve. And for instance, in Austin, Austin just flat out said is because there was increased restrictions, and that was why they should conserve. DFW said because of home values. And there was a variety. McAllen said we need to conserve because we need to protect jobs. And in San Antonio, again, is because, again, as we also understand, is because we want to make sure, we want to be careful. We don't want to have increased restrictions there as well. So Austin and San Antonio, because they have always been, they're used to having increased restrictions, is just say, hey guys, you know, conserve so we don't have increased restrictions. Another thing that came out of pre-market surveys, and we'll move on from here, is we had tested some water conservation tips, and the #1 conservation tip that came out, the personal responsibility, #1 is we're okay with personal responsibility. If they did it themselves, that's fine. If they had to hire help, in fact, hiring help was the lowest. But if Any kind of repairs was came in at 74%, had the highest appeal. Morning watering came in at 71%, and improved aim of irrigation came in third, and deep watering came in fourth. So those were water conservation tips that came in when we were trying to figure out which ones did they feel the most comfortable with, so that we could, you know, try to figure out where do we start pushing, and where do we need to maximize some of our education, and those are the things that helped us. We also looked at the differences in some of these areas as it related to Hispanics, men and women, and some other demographic areas as it related to that. But I'm not going to go into that. So other things that we needed to do to accomplish what we needed as far as pushing our messages out, we needed to, number one, first and foremost, we knew we needed to keep the water on. And that meant not only educating the consumer, we needed to work with legislators, and we needed to work with local governments. We needed to make sure that we were sitting down as necessary to make sure that when they were working with local ordinances, and to talk with those folks to make sure that all sides of the story were being communicated. We needed to talk about implications with ball fields, and that, guys, you can't just shut off the water because, you know, your ball fields may, depending on what they were proposing, is you know, that especially in the dead of summer, is that some of those ball fields were going to be hard as rock, especially in West Texas. You know, we were going to have some broken arms and legs, and you know, what's the reality of this is we needed to talk about jobs, and we needed to talk about, you know, what was the overall implications of shutting off water completely. We were able to communicate to them, you know, what scientifically was necessary to keep lawns alive, just alive, not green, but just alive. We were able to talk to them depending on what part of the state each group was in, because Texas is so big that each conversation was very, very different. And the other things that we found is, depending on which community we talked about, the reasons behind some of the water problems obviously varied based on infrastructure issues and all those kinds of things. So it needed a village of people to deal with whatever the circumstance and issue we were dealing with. And with our partners, from our industry partners and our education partners, because we had Texas A&M, and we had people from some of our other education institutions here in the state, certainly helping us and working with us on the science and such. We were very fortunate and lucky to have all these folks providing information for us to help with all this, all the presentations. So what else did we do is we educated the consumer, and I'm going to talk a little bit about more of those opportunities in a little bit. We, again, educated local governments so that smart decisions were made, and we only considered state legislation if necessary to deal with water issues, really if necessary, and we really didn't deal with any state legislation to keep the water on. I will tell you is we did we're able to pass legislation that allowed $1 million per biennium to be allotted for conservation awareness grants to statewide programs. And we were fortunate enough, the first biennium that this was passed, to have this funded. It's not funded every biennium, but we will try, and we certainly will be pushing again, as it's not, there's no reason to try to get this funded if there's no major drought going. But there is now the opportunity to have $1 million of state dollars allotted for conservation awareness grants out there, so that we've got this available to us. And again, as we were able to take advantage of some of these dollars to supplement our programs, and it was a very exciting time, and we were able to put these to some great use. And again, I'll show you some of the things that we were able to do with that. We worked with local governments on local ordinances. We delivered 1,560 curricula units to schools throughout Texas through the Junior Master Gardener program that included training 1,400 teachers throughout the state. We used the Master Gardener program here in Texas, and they held Earthkind workshops throughout Texas for the homeowners. And Earthkind they use the Earthkind landscape principles to teach homeowners, how to plant gardens and around their home, water-wise plants and gardens. And so we were very excited about their participation, and we were able to help fund them with the dollars that we got through this grant program. We also worked with Project Evergreen, and we targeted 2 cities to actually install water efficient sports fields, and certainly got some earned media from that. And the sports fields then were highlighted as being water efficient, and we made a big to-do and did an education with the communities that this is why they were water efficient. And the Texas Irrigation Association helped us with that a great deal in the installation and the media on that. So we were very excited about that whole option and opportunity. And there's just some of our partners on that. Is you can see we've held a press conference right there in Home Depot, and we're going to be doing that. That's our former ag commissioner, but our current statewide spokesperson is our current state comptroller. It's Comptroller Hager. Right there is, you can see that the San Antonio Water System is a sponsor, a supporter of ours, and a huge help with us. Right there at the podium, that's a podium there at the Capitol that we did a press conference last year, and that is Beck Brune, who was a commissioner with the Texas Water Development Board, and again is working with anybody and everybody that can help us. Is that the messages are strong, and the messages are consistent year after year, and we just want to make sure that everybody is engaged. And we again we all work for different places and different people, but the messages are still the same. And finally, this last picture right here that's actually the mayor of Fort Worth. And again, they have their own program. It's a very dynamic program. But there's our spokesperson, Comptroller Hager, sitting there with the mayor, and they're talking water. and that's great. They're, you know, it's two programs that can live very harmoniously together, and they're stronger together than they are apart. And that's the way it should be. It's the message. It's not necessarily the brand. And that's what we always try to emphasize, because it's otherwise we're not going to be as strong without working together. So some of the results, some of the EarthKind courses that we've done, I just wanted to show you is that, again, from the landscape design and some of the things that they talked about, amending the soils and selecting and managing turf to conserve water, you can see that they definitely will, or probably will, do some of these things. I think the funny one was, it's not funny at all, but installing a rain freeze sensor to increase irrigation efficiency was the one that they probably, or they definitely will not. In Texas, you know, maybe they won't do a lot of, they probably won't have a lot of freeze sensoring, but, you know, rain sensoring, they should. So that was probably the least effective one, that maybe there was a little more education on this one that we needed to happen. But I think for the most part, the education was effective. This is some just a picture of one of the ball fields that we did do. Some of the other things that we continue to do, and some of the long-term things that we have stretched this program out. Now, 2011 was when this drought really was hitting its peak. Well, we're in 2016, or 2016. Ooh, we're in 2018. And Texas WaterSmart is still going. If you had asked me in 2011, was this thing still going to go ahead and go on? No, I would not have guessed that at all. And it is, and the reason why it is because we realized that we had to keep going, because we may end up in another drought, and we play with it off and on all the time. So we keep going, and we sit back and say, it doesn't have to be this big, huge media blitz. It can be about a lot of different things, and it can be about some targeted information. And so that's exactly what we've done. And so we've got some campaign materials. We work with the Texas Department of Agriculture, and we have about 10 communities, certified retirement communities, that we again we have Texas WaterSmart education garden pad sites that they submit to us designs for WaterSmart designs, and they have to put in WaterSmart irrigation and plants, and the installation has to be all WaterSmart approved, and then they have to have a maintenance plan, and then they have to have a sign that has to be educational, so the whole community can read about why this is WaterSmart. And so you've got a whole community that understands Texas WaterSmart. I told you at the beginning that, moving on to we created TNLA, we created a Texas WaterSmart certification. We couldn't take for granted that landscape contractors understood what was Texas WaterSmart. So we did put together a Texas WaterSmart certification. Now, I promise you that this WaterSmart certification isn't going to make anybody an irrigator. That's for sure. But hopefully this is going to make sure that landscape contractors will understand the basics of not only about just what it takes to be WaterSmart in the landscape, but it's understanding the basics of just truly all aspects of water in the landscape. Where does water come from? What are the different aspects of groundwater in and around the landscapes, especially not so much in agriculture, but certainly urban agriculture or urban water. And a lot of our folks do not understand that. We certainly want our retail garden centers to understand when they're selling plants and making sure that folks who are selling plants can at least push our people who are do-it-yourselfers to the right people and say, these are the questions that you need to ask, or these are the places that you need to go, or you do need irrigation and you need to be asking these questions. So that was the whole point behind that Texas WaterSmart certification, and we're pretty happy about that. And we passed the tax-free holiday legislation for all plants and WaterSense products, and that's the Memorial Day holiday that is coming up, and we're very excited about that. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that's happening, but I wanted to share with you a couple other things before we get to that. And one of those is, do you remember, I want to show you what one of the PSAs, our new PSAs that we put together based on the messaging that talked about our future generations. And this is our new PSA that we have.
As Texans, it's our responsibility to pass down conservation tips to our children. Teach them to check and repair leaking faucets, and to water only the grass, not the sidewalks, by properly adjusting your sprinkler heads. Then make sure they know to water only in the early morning or evening. These minor changes to your lawn care can make sure we have plenty of safe drinking water. Be WaterSmart and protect our water resources for future generations of Texans.
Did you see the co-branding with Water IQ on the side? That was that one is being shown in the Dallas area, and so North Texas Municipal Water District helped fund that, and we co-branded with them, and that's where that came from. Some of our post-survey results, we do have some good post-survey results that did come out of all of these efforts, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can see on the screen that we were able to have some changes. Now, I will tell you that this doesn't necessarily mean that it all came from Texas WaterSmart. We did have a stop and start time, and it was all based on a time frame when we started and stopped our public awareness campaign, but we also know that others were doing theirs at the same time. So is it all about us? Not necessarily, and that's okay. But we do know that this is what we do know is that people, that public awareness campaigns and that people are continuing to understand that conserving water in Texas is more the norm than not, that at least they're susceptible to the message, and that we, at least from Texas WaterSmart's perspective, that we firmly believe that we need to continue this momentum or the program, because drought will happen, and we need to be prepared and not start from the ground up, because it took a while for us to begin this process. This didn't just happen, and we do have a core group, and our supporters are still out there ready to go should something major happen in the next few years. So since the end of 2011, over $1.5 million have been raised, have been spent, should I say. We've over $200,000 have been donated in kind, and about $500,000 have we've secured in earned media. We have to keep that momentum going. And finally, I just wanted to end with our lawn and garden tax-free holiday. And this is very short, in fact. And actually, I'm going to do something else. This is actually there's more stuff here. This is the Texas Nursery and Landscape Association's website. If you go to programs and events, and this is the Lawn and Garden WaterSmart Tax Holiday. And if you go to our marketing toolkit, this is the way we have actually worked this. Is we've just got a video for folks. So that they, have got somewhat of an idea. We've got Instagram pictures for them to use.
Our industry is getting younger, and let's face it, we all have issues being able to completely understand other generations' point of views.
Sorry about that. And social media post rewrote for them. It's just a toolkit for them to use at their leisure with their own. I won't go into it, but they've got the logos any way they would like. It's taking a little bit longer, but that's in a nutshell. That the program as a whole is alive and well. It continues to run. It will continue for as long as water is as valuable as oil, and I can't imagine that changing in the state of Texas. So, John, I think that's all I've got.
Great. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate that. It was very interesting, and I thought I knew everything about the Texas WaterSmart program, and I was even taking notes on there. So that was really, really good. We have a lot of questions here that I've gotten from our participants and audience. Let me do that. There we go. All right. So I'm going to put your information up there, Amy, while we do a Q&A session here. I'm going to just go through some of these questions. I'll combine some, and I'll weave in some of my own questions as well. But I want to start at the very beginning, Amy, because I want to reiterate this. You were faced with a crisis, which caused organizations like yours, and you mentioned the Home Depots, and the private industry, Scott's of the world, to come together and work with your state government to create a solution. Now, the original solution, and I may be wrong on this, but that was really turning off all the water to basically all the landscapes throughout Texas. Is that right?
It wasn't necessarily all the landscapes, but we were, depending on where you were, and there were some communities that was happening. The DFW area was the one that was in severe crisis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was where this all started, and that was where we Actually, that's where it all started, and that's where we gained our greatest ally at the end of the day, was with the North Texas Municipal Water District.
And how important was it for you to have that partnership with Commissioner Staples and the Texas government from the very beginning?
It was huge, but it was absolutely huge. But I can tell you, they were the most understanding, because they were able to understand the issues, of course, and that they had already established relationships that many of us did not have. And so they were able to use the doors that they already had, in order to communicate the messages that needed to be communicated, or to have us sit at those tables. And that was key. And that was very key. But we had to bring in the science, and we had to bring in what was backing our message.
Nationally, our industry, depending on who we talk to throughout different states, and we talked to many of them about promoting efficient irrigation, focusing primarily on technology, but also right plant, right place. Mm-hmm. Some localities really focus on the plants. You need to have the plants, we'll figure out the irrigation later. Some areas focus on, I don't care what you have down there, we'll focus on the irrigation technologies, making sure that it's done efficiently, you're not losing any water. Throughout the process, from the onset and this idea that was Texas WaterSmart to where it is now, what do you think that balance is when looking at what kind of plants you have in your landscape versus the irrigation technologies used and the management of the irrigation system?
It's got to be both, all three. It's got to be all three. It's the management of the system, it's got to be the technology, and it's got to be all three. And that's where the education has got to come together. And that was what I think that, again, that's where we talked about from the Texas Nursery and Landscape Association. We didn't know for sure if our folks understood that, or our landscape contractors understood that. And we know that there's always this conversation between, the gap between the irrigator and the landscape contractor. And then you've got the consumer in there too, is just like, oh my gosh. But again, we needed to make sure that from industry's perspective, that was important. But we also needed to make sure that we were doing our part so that we could go tell these partners of ours that we were going to do our part, and that we understood that this was a three-pronged issue. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And very important. I could not agree more. I'm glad you guys have that perspective, because I feel sometimes it's so much focus is only placed on one and the others are just forgotten about. It needs to be all three. It needs to be right plant, right place, what technology are you using, make sure those technologies are managed properly. And I could not agree more. And I know you mentioned surveys, and I love surveys, and my wife does surveys for a living. However, in addition to the surveys you had, before, during, and after, are there any real numbers in terms of water savings that are associated from the onset of Texas WaterSmart to post drought and where you are now?
Yeah.
And if you don't have them in front of you, is there a place where they're listed, or because that was a few questions.
I can. Let's see. I have it right in front of me. I do have that. Yes.
Uh-huh. And we can send it out to folks later on too. I mean, the people that attended that. But you do have that, and it's positive for the initiatives you undertook, right?
It was.
Like
It absolutely was.
This is actually working, right?
Yes. Yes.
Good. And with that, go ahead. I'm sorry. And with that said, you and I have talked about this, Amy. Is this something that you feel can be replicated in different states? This isn't special to Texas. We all know Texas is special. Don't get me wrong, but this kind of initiative isn't special to Texas, right? It can be implemented elsewhere, right? In your feeling.
Absolutely, and I don't think you need. In many ways, is I'm not sure that it needs these big media things that happen, because I will tell you that we did it based on the crises, but I also believe that there's bits and pieces of it that could be replicated in any state and in any circumstance and situation, that without a doubt. And I think the most important thing that has happened is the public-private partnerships that have occurred, and the fact that people sit at the table and talk, and that it's not just, I mean, we sit and talk with the retailers, we sit and talk with, one of the other things that happens is once a year we reach out and we write it, and they tweak it, but the legislators will write op-ed pieces on water conservation, and all the state representatives, or not all of them, but a lot of them, will have these placed in their local newspapers about water conservation. Well, they don't talk about Texas WaterSmart. Texas WaterSmart helps them write it, and this, that, and the other. But that's, the importance of water conservation. It makes them look good. It helps us. Again, this is about the message. This isn't about trying to push this brand. And so it's little things like that helps us continue pushing water conservation messages out.
And do you feel this has been, judging from your members and the general landscape industry, was this widely, this concept of Texas WaterSmart, everything you implemented, was it widely accepted? Did you all get any pushback at all, or was it something they felt is needed, given what you're facing?
Yeah, it was needed. There were other things that were happening in the state of Texas, but I don't know that there was something that was a public-private partnership that was happening. And I will tell you that the landscape industry and the landscape irrigation industry, we weren't engaged in anything. So just to have industry involved with anything was pretty special, with anything as it relates, formally conservation wise. So that was pretty special, I think. Now, not to say, now that again is, there was that was pretty, there was some groups locally were involved, but statewide. It was special.
And you mentioned a big emphasis on water efficient landscapes, and you even mentioned athletic fields is one of the first questions we had. Was there a definition of what a water efficient athletic field was, or what a water efficient landscape was? Was it ever defined, or was it just something that incorporated, like I said, the technologies and plants used?
And that was actually, yeah, well, I mean, again, as we depended on Texas Irrigation Association determined that, and the people who knew better, and or the Texas, or the the soil and crop sciences folks at Texas A&M and Scott's Miracle Grow, who was one of our partners, and all those people. I mean, we had some very specific things that we were looking at. So, yeah.
Okay, very good. Well, listen, Amy, it's the top of the hour, and I don't want to be cognizant of everyone's time. Thank you very much. It was a great webinar to end our series on, our series, the season series, I guess you could say. I just want to put a list up here. These are all the webinars that we had so far this year. There were 6 of them. You can see our old date was still down there on April 12th, but these are all the ones that we had. Social media, sustainability, ag water challenges, landscape water challenges, infrastructure, and then Texas WaterSmart. All of these are located on our website, irrigation.org/webinar_series. Please check them out if you haven't done so already. And stay tuned. We'll make sure that you all are some of the first to know about our second 2018 series later on this summer. So, Amy, thank you very much. That was fantastic. For those of you who are on the webinar, if we didn't get to your question, please feel free to reach out to Amy or myself. Be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. And so again, thank you everyone for attending this webinar and continuing to support the groups like the Irrigation Association and TNL8. So, Amy, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.